For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning.
Morning. I'm going to, as you'd expect, start with the Asia-Pacific markets, and as you'd expect, they are fairly mixed, given that we're going to get inflation figures from the United States round about lunchtime, our time. But one to watch, I'd look out for this one actually. Toshiba up more than 9% after a local media outlet has reported a potential buyout. So it's worth looking at that because the company's actually been it's completely up and down as far as its troubles are concerned. Mainland China stocks up marginally this morning, shares up overall, according to the MSCI broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares, up about 0.5%. Thailand closed for a holiday today. Sri Lanka, we've been talking about the difficulties that they've had there. They effectively have run out of fuel. They are following other emerging economies buying cheap Russian oil. It reflects a trend, really, of these cash-strapped or financially challenged countries scrambling to cut import costs. So it's actually worth noting as well that there is still a market for this discounted Russian oil. How that actually ties in with a geopolitical future for Sri Lanka, another story, of course. As far as the US is concerned, then, so stock futures up. The minutes of the Fed yesterday were quite hawkish, really. They feel as though there are small ups and downs there, but again, inflation figures will be pointing towards whether or not, and how by, well, not whether or not so much, I'm sure they will. It's a question of how much the Fed increases rates on its first and second meeting, November 1st and 2nd meeting next. And the Federal Reserve will be waiting to see. They think that they're going to be fairly hot, but we'll be looking at those later today. As far as the UK pound is concerned, well, it's all fairly choppy. I was reporting yesterday that despite what some media outlets were saying, i.e. the Bank of England is going to stop its support for the gilt markets on Friday, it's sort of speaking from both sides of its mouth, quite honestly at the moment. And these mixed messages are causing sterling to be fairly choppy as well. In fact, sterling whipsawed. Is it going to delay its rebuying? It spent £4 billion yesterday, so it's still quite active. And that's the biggest interception in the market, intervention in the market since it entered the market last month. So it's still going. Real question is what happens on Monday. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, she hasn't been in power very long, now coming under pressure from within her own party about the tax cuts which she's proposing. I have to say that listening to ministers who are being told to say, show me an economist that thinks that increasing taxes increases growth as well. That's a bit of a challenge, but Conservative parties, in fact, a lot of political parties, I'm sure you've got examples of your own as well, tend to destroy themselves often, rather than just, taking the onslaught of the various opposition. And it's still the jury's still out on where these tax cuts are going to be, and the OBR will be, the Office of Budget Responsibility, will be casting its eye over them, and we'll hear about that on Monday, the 31st of October. I think that's going to be quite a crucial day. What this confusion has also done, never mind how it's affected mortgage holders and the gilt market and our pensions and all the rest of it, is actually some pension funds were going to be put to work to invest in longer term development for the UK. Now they are particularly seem to be unwilling to do that, given the way the gilt market has been persuading, and they don't like the fact that they've had to pay a lot of money to get out of what they call illiquid assets. The British economic policy, now again, we're hearing two different things from the IMF. I suspect this may be, who am I to say, it may be a function of having too many reporters there from too many media outlets, but it looks as though the G7 ministers meeting yesterday yesterday at the IMF had a thinly veiled criticism of the UK. They didn't mention the country by name, but one G7 minister was fairly specific about the UK. And again, I was reporting yesterday that some of the IMF, some of the delegates from it were actually praising the fact that the UK was making, they call it 360. I debate that. I think it's more like a 180-degree turn in their policies. Anyway, that's something which I said there's going to be a lot of volatility, and that will continue all the week through. But the big focus, of course, is those US inflation figures round about lunchtime. Just before we hit the end of my global report, the Biden administration is weighing up whether it's going to put restricting imports of Russian aluminium. Now, again, that would actually get in the way of the way in which that metal is used in a wide range of consumer products, and it would also reverse a previous White House stance that such sanctions could wreak havoc on the global markets. And finally, let's turn our attention to oil. I was talking yesterday about UBS's possible, their forecast that it could be $125 a barrel. Already Saudi Arabia has rejected as not based on facts the kind of comments that they've had, not just from the United States, but other consumers as well, that the OPEC Plus decision was politically based. It wasn't that Saudi's saying it has perfectly fine economic perfectly fine economic reasons for doing that, but I would say that all this points to the price of oil rising. That is the global view this morning.
Okay, real quickly, Michael, the UK has now become a butt of jokes in the IMF. That's what is happening invariably. I'd like to ask again, what is even happening? What is the Bank of England doing? Are they going to stop these buybacks on Friday? Or they are not? Because two mixed messaging. On the Financial Times yesterday, something different was said. Kwesi Kwarteng saying something entirely, and the Bank of England saying something entirely different. So what is really going on? And secondly, the knock-on effect on the British economy. We saw the economic numbers out of August. The economy has started to shrink. Cost of living has become a problem as we speak. If you earn 2,500 or 2,700 pounds sterling on a monthly basis, normally at the end of the month, with all your buys and everything, discretionary spending, you should be able to save close to 400 to 500 pounds. But now, I think Sky News was doing an analysis yesterday and saying now, with all of the increases to come in 2023, you can't barely save 200 pounds any longer. People are falling into poverty. What is the government doing? The Bank of England is doing what it is saying two different things, it appears. Yesterday, I quoted that report from the FT saying that apparently they weren't going to finish on Friday. They may well go beyond that. That doubt is still very much in the market's mind, of course. So there are a number of doubts which are surrounding all this. It really depends on whom you speak to, for whom you believe. The chief executive of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England, said quite categorically that this bond buying would finish on Friday. The FT reported yesterday morning, and I quoted it to you, that it could be that maybe that bond buying will extend beyond Friday. This is how things work. Unfortunately, that officials are very odd about the way in which they, perhaps like you and me, I would imagine we're both relatively straight talkers. You just say, look, this is what we're going to do. But apparently, there are officials saying sorts of different things. And the IMF, you say that the UK is a butt of jokes. Well, it might be, but at the same time, I was saying to you yesterday that some of the IMF comments were actually quite supportive about what was going on in the UK. Long-term tax cuts mean growth. What they don't necessarily do is mean more productivity. And that is a word which I will stick to when I'm looking at what happens on October the 31st. Yes, you're absolutely right. As far as disposable income is concerned, it is shrinking and everybody's tightening their belts. How long will they be forced to do it? Will the energy prices be as high as expected? Will the Ukraine-Russian war continue in the way it's continuing now? And
supply chains are getting better over the global picture. It's very, very complicated. I think it's very difficult to draw definitive lines across what's going on, given the volatility in the markets. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is, unfortunately. And we're getting a lot of crosstalk from organisations, not least of which the British government, the Bank of England, and also the IMF.
Okay, Michael, quickly. I mean, the whole point about discussions of the UK economy by the IMF is simply that Trussonomics has become a cautionary tale for leaders who promise so much and they don't plan well enough ahead. But two views. Has the UK economy become a zombie economy? Or, as someone was arguing today, I think in The Guardian or was it the Daily Telegraph, that the problem is not Truss and Rethink, but that, the rot goes far deeper. Which of the two do you think is really best description of the situation in the UK today? Then looking ahead, this weekend, the Chinese, their meetings, Xi Jinping, once another time of 5 years. Now investors are hoping that, well, maybe there will be a shift. Maybe you will reduce state control when it sets up the standing committee, and when later, a team of new economic regulators come in. Do you think that there will be a shift, or, Xi Jinping's propaganda of economic prosperity will still be dominated by state control and isolationism, more or less?
Big questions, really, about this weekend. I mean, it tends to be a fairly opaque occasion. I don't know what they are going to decide, but here's what they need to be. Here's what the Chinese authorities need to be thinking about. A, they need to be weighing up whether the zero COVID policy is actually working or whether it's crimping the economy. And B, what to do about an aging population. I've always said this, and the ratio of the working population to the aging stroke retiring population. That is something which China very much needs to get its heads round. I suspect we may hear a little bit from Taiwan. I understand that the Chinese authorities are looking for a parallel between Russia and Ukraine and are revising what they feel about regaining Taiwan, as they put it. These are the sort of issues that I would like to hear about. I don't really care whether the authorities say they're going to be in power for much longer. I don't care whether Xi Jinping actually says it's a lifetime. I don't think those things really count. I mean, really, what we have to concentrate on is how China is going to join in the global economy and also face the pressures. It needs to export as much as it needs to import. It is part of the club. It must play by the club rules. That's what I would say about that. As far as the British economy is concerned, I'm not quite sure what rot you're talking about. I mean, I'm certain you could criticise any kind of economy, particularly a very small one like the UK. I didn't happen to support its continued membership or quasi-membership of the EU. I supported Brexit. I knew it would be difficult. I wanted to stay in the EU because it happens to suit my own personal, and a lot of people, a lot of my neighbours would like the easy way of travelling to the continent. Well, that, of course, is not going to happen anymore, and nor will our retiring lives be faced there. But what rot are we talking about? The lack of productivity? Absolutely. Nobody's managed to do that. What rot are we talking about? Long-term unemployed? Absolutely. Why are there 5 million people in this country claiming unemployment benefit or registered unfit to work? There are 1.2 million jobs still available in this country. If that's the rot you're talking about, yeah, couldn't agree more. No government, as I understand it, has ever managed to shift the rump of the long-term unemployed. You've got to make it worthwhile to work. If you don't make it worthwhile to work, then people who are on those fringes will go on to benefits because they're lazy. It's just the way the world is. If that's the rot they're talking about, couldn't agree more. As far as feeling your way forward with a white stick, I feel as though this is what politicians and indeed economists and commentators do most of the time. What will happen, we do not know. All we can do is have a look at whatever long-term indicators there are. The one thing I'm pretty certain about is I don't think that higher taxes cause growth in economies. I may be wrong. I don't think they do.
Well, thank you, Michael.
All right.